This is American Real, where we aim to inspire, empower, and enlighten you through the stories of our guests. Here's your host, Roger Brooks.
So let's talk about the state of the economy today. Why is now the time, Mike, to think about a reverse mortgage?
Well, the silver lining is home values continue to remain okay. What determines the value of a home? It will never change. It's always jobs, and there's plenty of jobs out there, and supply and demand. And in my neck of the woods, they're not making any more land. And so the homes tend to hold their value or continue to increase, even if it's at a moderate pace. I think it's a great time to at least begin to get educated about how a reverse mortgage can help their parents, help themselves, and really solve some problems that are very real out there, especially now with inflation.
This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. My guest today is Mike Brouse. You are a reverse mortgage specialist, helping families pay for in-home elder health care. And for over 20 years, you have helped hundreds of families integrate their mortgage into their long and short-term financial plan by partnering with real estate professionals, financial planners, and estate planning attorneys. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. I know we've been trying to connect for quite some time. We finally made it happen today. And I would love to start out by you telling us a little bit about your brand and how we got connected through David Breyer's Brand Intervention Masterclass.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love to set that up. I was looking, for a way to really crystallize what I represent to the senior community and kind of distill how I can help them and how I add value to them. And I found David through various platforms. I think it was probably LinkedIn. And I actually responded or commented, I think, on a LinkedIn post that he did. And on a Saturday morning, he called me. And we weren't really ready to get started at that point. But, we stayed in touch and then finally invested in his masterclass, and it really revolutionized the way I think about branding and rising above the noise. That's one of his monikers, and of course that's where we met as well.
Yes, and I'd love for you to, if you can, Mike, talk a little bit further about that, because you say revolutionize, right? So many people, myself included, when we hear branding, it kind of gets confused with marketing. So can you talk about your perception and your understanding of what the essence is of someone's brand and why it is so important?
Yeah, so there is a lot of noise out there, if you will. People are vying for our attention: billboards, radio, television, social media platforms. So really, we're spoon-fed what maybe the media wants us to recognize or buy, if you will. So in the world of reverse mortgages, you have to differentiate yourself from the platforms that are out there that are really maybe using a celebrity spokesperson to gain their attention. And how do I, as a kind of solo operator with a small team, reach my audience so I can add value to them and help them? So the branding thing was, okay, how do I convey into not only pictures, colors, and a story to reach them, but how do I get on their consciousness and get in their consciousness about how I can help them and how I'm different. So I think that's really what David helped me to do, was to not think about it from maybe my standpoint, but think about it from the consumer standpoint, and maybe some of the things that they're living going through and then connect my value to their need and then see if there's a synergy. But you can't do that if you can't help people if they don't know you exist.
Right.
I think branding and the proper message really allows you to put yourself out there so they can find you. It's not like I'm looking for a podium or a platform to beat my fists on my chest and say, look at me. It's more like, no, look at me. I can help you. And this is the value that I can bring, to your life or your community.
No, that's so well said. And can you give us just one example of how you were able to go from where you were to where you are today, either through, the messaging, or what would be one example of something you were able to take away from that program and apply it in the real world?
Yeah, we look at the top three things that are kind of, I'm not going to use the word plaguing, but some of the top three things that are concerns among retirees. And we know that like 11,000 people are turning 65 every day. Wow. In America. 80% of them are not ready to retire. These aren't my numbers. These are the government statistics and surveys. But among that group, there's over $10 trillion in home equity. So when it comes to identifying, some of the challenges that a lot of American homeowners are facing, when it comes to identifying that, how do I distill a message that's going to connect, with them, in their heart, because they're looking for an answer. They're looking for a way to solve their problem. And in some cases, they don't know they have a problem because they haven't reached a point yet where it's like crisis. And then they begin to reach out. If you can, somehow use your brand and your platform to bring that message to them before there is a crisis, that I feel like that's, preventative. And that's the power of the message and getting out there.
Wonderful. So this is a topic that I think many families talk about, right? Because as you mentioned, finances is one of the most important topics of conversation for elders. And I know just from my own family and clients that I have, that they're wondering about these types of services that might exist. And I also know that your product does carry with it some stigmas, right, about the industry in general. And I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about the industry, why there is that stigma, and really the truths about how this type of reverse mortgage can be beneficial to people.
Yeah, thank you. I think when you think of the now, here's something that might be a little controversial when I share it, but hear me out in that when you think about the trust ladder meaning, if there was a ladder and at the bottom you had low trust, at the top of the ladder you had high trust, where do mortgage professionals fall on that trust ladder? Okay, so they're at the very bottom, right? And they're joined. And this again may seem a little controversial and counterintuitive, but really we're holding up the bottom with used car salespeople, and we're also holding up the bottom with attorneys, which is kind of counterintuitive because there's so many great attorneys. But so here we are on this trust ladder. We got mortgage folks at the bottom, used car sales folks, and then attorneys. And then Roger, when you throw in the reverse mortgage piece of the mortgage of the mortgage being at the bottom of the trust ladder, you're not even on the ladder anymore. Right? You're not even on the ladder anymore. So you actually have to do some substantial stuff to get yourself on the ladder, and then you're starting at the bottom. So that's one challenge with reverse mortgages. And you say, well, why is that? Why are mortgage professionals, and specifically reverse mortgage professionals, so low on the trust ladder? Here's kind of my explanation. Number one, when you look at the top three things that people really don't know about reverse mortgages, but they think they know. I think it was it Will Rogers that said it's not what you don't know that will hurt you, It's what you know that just ain't so that will hurt you. So when we talk about myth perceptions or common things about the reverse mortgage itself that are not accurate, this is where we can kind of change the dialogue or change the opinion. So the number one thing is that, the bank owns your home. Well, the bank does not own your home. You remain on title. You own the home. It's just that you have a mortgage on it. And it just happens to be a reverse mortgage. So that is one of the number one thing that people think when they come to me is that the bank's going to own my home. So you remain on title. Everything that you've got set up with a trust or a will, it all follows, legally, that the heirs, it transfers and trust. And I'm not an attorney and all that, but just know that the borrower owns the home. The homeowner remains on title. The second thing is that the heirs or the children feel like they're going to be X'd out of any remaining equity once their parents pass. And that's not true either. Really, all that has to happen is when the homeowner passes is that the existing lien gets paid off, but any remaining equity stays with the estate or with the heirs. So those are the two biggest things. And the number three is that they're so expensive. They're so expensive. Our seniors are really, getting the raw end of the deal because they have to pay into this. Well, without going too far into it, when you think about this is probably the last mortgage you'll ever do, is it expensive? Or the fact that you're going to literally save your house by getting a reverse mortgage, is that expensive? Here's the biggest thing where we find out, exactly, well, why is there a 2% upfront cost on the appraised value of the home? Remember, we're talking about it being expensive. There is a provision in the reverse mortgage called a non-recourse feature. What that non-recourse feature means, and actually what you're paying for with that 2% charge on the appraised value, okay? There's a lot of moving parts there. Hope I'm not confusing our audience, but non-recourse means that you can never owe more than the home is worth. And you're literally paying into the fund that makes sure that that's never going to happen. So for instance, non-recourse means that, let's say that Mr. and Mrs. Jones did a reverse mortgage, and years later, either the market maybe has declined or their reverse mortgage balance has exceeded the appraised value of the home. Well, in some cases, there would be what's called a deficiency judgment that would be passed on to the heirs. But with a reverse mortgage, because of the non-recourse feature, that difference is made up by an insurance claim. And that's what the FHA insurance is in place for. And that's what enables the non-recourse feature to kick in. So when we think things are, when people say they're so expensive, well, you're paying for a feature that actually is a huge benefit to the estate, but also it gives the borrower peace of mind knowing that, hey, I'm not going to saddle my kids. If in the event that I owe more than the home is worth when I pass, I'm not going to saddle them with a bunch of debt. So those are the three main things: that the homeowner stays on title, they own the home, any remaining equity goes to the heirs. And when you think about it, they're not expensive at all. It's a huge provision that you would probably pay a lot more money for if you, really could grasp the power of it in protecting the estate's value.
Great. No, thank you for walking us through that. And if we can, I'd love just to take a very rudimentary example again, so our audience can understand this. So if, for example, the home was worth $100,000 and the couple or family owned it outright. So there's a $2,000, 2% or $2,000 upfront fee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then how does it work? Will they receive 100% of the assessed value of their home?
No, in a reverse mortgage, depending on the age. So there's three things that determine how much equity is available in a reverse mortgage. The first thing is, of course, the appraised value of the home. In this case, it's 100,000. The second thing is the age of the youngest borrower.
Okay.
So sometimes you have borrowers that are varying in age, but they do go by the age of the youngest borrower. So let's say that you had a 70-year-old. They would qualify for roughly 55 to 60% of the home's appraised value. So you're never going to 100% loan to value, but it's going to stop, depending on the age, right around 65%.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. And then can you give us an approximation, like how does it work on the fee? Is it like an interest rate that we're used to when we take out a home equity, or a refinance? How does that work?
Yeah, so there is. It's the reverse mortgage rates. Typically, like 85% of all the reverse mortgages I help families with are adjustable. So always with an adjustable rate mortgage, there's two parts. There's an index, which fluctuates, and then there is a margin, which never changes. So generally right now, of course, in a rising interest rate environment, you're going to have margins in the 5.5%, 6.5%, and then the index, is what that is. And so you're looking at a HECM mortgage with an interest rate of in the low nines. So what happens in the mechanics of it is that every month there is a payment that's accruing based on the amount that you've borrowed. Mm-hmm. Similar, if you're a homeowner, Roger, that you would have a principal and interest payment.
Yes.
So that payment is still, that amount is still being generated, but it's being deferred each and every month up until the time that the home is sold. Okay, so that's the way that works. It is, compounding, and there's never a minimum payment due, but those are the mechanics. There is an interest rate associated with the amount being borrowed, and every month that balance is growing. So there is a thing called equity erosion, but the benefit of never having to make a mortgage payment is a huge relief to, a lot of people. And then of course, the stipulation is it must be your primary residence. You've got to, you got to be living in the home, and you must make sure that you pay your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance and keep the house, in relatively good shape. So those are really the only three things that, have to happen.
Okay. So if we're looking at the difference between a refinance of a home and a reverse mortgage, in the case of a refinance, you're obviously going to have to pay that money back every month at the interest rate that you locked it in at, right? Whereas with a reverse mortgage, you're saying there's no repayment or monthly payment or minimum payment?
Correct. No, never a minimum payment required. All you're responsible for is paying the property taxes and homeowners insurance.
Got it. Okay. And if the borrower does not own the house 100%, so let's take that same scenario, $100,000 value, the youngest person on the mortgage is 70 years old, so they get 50% of it. But what if they owe, what if they owe 25,000 on that house? Does that come off of the top?
Yeah. So that has to be, you would be paying the existing traditional mortgage off with the reverse mortgage. So in this case, if there's 50,000 available in equity, that 25,000 would be paid off, and then there would be 25,000 in available equity to them to use as they wish for whatever they wish.
Got it. Very great. Thank you for walking us through that. It makes a lot more sense to me now, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. So I don't know if you went through some of this, but one of the things you'd like to talk about is an income preservation strategy. Is that what we just discussed, or is that something in addition to?
Yeah, it's something in addition to, and it's actually a strategy. When you think about, who can I help a reverse mortgage with? Well, it really falls into one of three categories. There are folks, it's a needs-based mortgage. In other words, they really need to do the reverse mortgage, or they need to sell the home. And in some cases, it's perfectly fine to sell the home. It just didn't work out for them in that case that a reverse mortgage was able to help them. So that is kind of like the mortgage. They call it a mortgage of last resort, but hey, it's nice to have options, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's say that, Mrs. Jones, and I'm just going to use this as an example. She might be a widow, and a third of the income or 2/3 of the income may have gone away when her husband passed. So now she's got to figure out how to stay in the home, how to maintain the home, and how to pay her bills. Well, in that case, that would be a perfect example for a reverse mortgage. She wants to stay in the home. She wants to be in the community that she raised her family in. And she wants her kids and grandkids and great grandkids to be able to come over to the house and still make memories.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of that's the first part, right? Those are folks that really need to do the reverse mortgage to stay in the home. The second group of folks are ones that, they've retired. They have adequate income coming in. Maybe they have some savings. But if they need to replace the car or replace the roof or replace the water heater, just little expenses that come up in life, they may have to put that on a credit card. And when you're on a fixed income, putting things on a credit card is kind of a financial death spiral. Right. So these folks could really be helped by a reverse mortgage in that we create a line of credit that they can draw on when they need it. And it's there. It can never be canceled. It can never be reduced. And this is something that's, when you compare, you were mentioning, I think, a home equity line of credit where you take the loan out, it's there available for you. When you want to use it, you have to make interest-only payments on it. It's typically only good for 10 years, and then it goes, you can't borrow on it anymore. You're just paying it back in a straight principal and interest payment. Well, that's a HELOC. That's a home equity line of credit. The HECM, which is the home equity conversion mortgage, or the reverse mortgage, that can be set up as a line of credit that cannot be touched, regardless of what happens to the home value or the reason that, like, I had a home equity line of credit in 2008 for whatever amount it was. I got a letter from, it's Chase in this case. They had my mortgage, and they said, "Dear Mr. Brouse, we've frozen your line of credit due to a national housing crisis." And I thought, man, this is, I don't need to have this taken away from me right now. Right. 2008, the heart of the recession, I'm in the mortgage industry, and all of a sudden my bank just pulled my safety net out from under my feet. I knew that could happen because I'd actually, done seminars on, why the home equity line of credit might not be the best vehicle to use in a time when the housing market's a little bit on unstable ground. So just know that, America, your home equity line of credit can be frozen or canceled at the push of a button by your bank. So why is a home equity conversion mortgage superior, in my opinion, to a HELOC? Well, it can't be canceled or reduced. So that line of credit can be a lifesaver for a lot of people, just to have it there. They're not being charged for it, and it's just there. Now, here's the thing: when we were talking about a buffer, the third bucket, so I mentioned there's three not buckets, but three categories of people that may take advantage of a reverse mortgage. The first one is the folks that really need to do it. The second are folks that are doing fine, but if there was something that happened, they may have to put some of the expenses on a credit card. Now, the third is kind of the one where I tend to put a lot of my efforts on, and it comes full circle to my branding. Because what does David say? How does he say it? That marketing is advertising is the seed. Marketing is where you're going to plant your seed. Is that how it goes?
Yes.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but so when it comes to branding, what audience am I trying to reach with the offering that I have? So my biggest deal is trying to educate financial professionals on the strategic use of equity to prevent their clients from going through a financial calamity during the downs of the market. Okay. So when we talk about a line of credit, what can it be used for? Well, let's say Mr. and Mrs. Smith are retired they're living off of their pension, right? And their pension might be subject to market volatility. It might be exposed to the market. Now, Roger, if you needed, let's say you needed $5,000 a month to live on in retirement, and you kept taking $5,000 a month from your pension or a combination of savings. If you kept doing that in a down market, you might exceed the interest that that investment is producing. So what happens is, the market's down, the investment is not spinning off the interest it once was, but you still need to have that $5,000. Is that making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you continue to take that $5,000, you're eating at the principal or the golden goose that's producing the interest for you to live on. So what a lot of people do is in a down cycle, they continue to take that much money and as their monthly income because they have to. But at the same time, they're depleting the golden goose that's producing the interest.
Right.
So a strategy that can come alongside a retiree in a down market is to have that line of credit in place, the reverse mortgage line of credit, and begin to supplement your income with that line of credit.
Yeah, and Mike, what the question I have is, and I don't know if this is, something that you would know or could guide us on, but what is kind of the magic number? Like if someone has, $250,000 in savings or $500,000 or $1 million, like when does it go from, okay, I have enough savings that I don't need to do a reverse mortgage versus I'm at a point where it's just too risky for me to take that $5,000 a month? Because I think that's what a lot of people think about, because people that were responsible and saved, and they might have a little nest egg or a nice nest egg, but how much does that nest egg, in your opinion, need to be before someone says, well, I think this reverse mortgage opportunity is really the best scenario?
Yeah, what I would do, Roger, is defer that question to a financial planner. But I can tell you that most of the financial planners I know use some kind of software to illustrate what outcomes from a retirement plan would look like. And always in most of the software, and here I'm not dodging the question, I'm just not really qualified
Sure.
to answer how much somebody would need in retirement, because everybody's got a different number. But in conceptually, a lot of financial planners are running their plan and they're looking at the customer going, you need to like double up on the amount that you put away every month. And the poor customers think to themselves, that's literally impossible. I can't do that, especially now because of inflation, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is most of the planning software that I've seen, like I'll use one, eMoney Pro, which a lot of financial planners embrace and use to model retirement scenarios for their clients, is there's a little area called other. And so what I do is I sit down with the financial planner and say, look through your database. If there's folks that you can identify that might be on the bubble, let's incorporate the reverse mortgage conversation into your conversation with them
as an option.
And then use that little other, right? Use that little other, plug in potentially what home equity we could leverage and see how it changes their retirement outcome. And it is mind blowing.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it revolutionizes some people's retirement plan just to know that, that's available there. Most of the financial planners that I know, they have an intake form. And on that intake form, they're learning things about the client. They're learning about their investing style, their personality profile when it comes to money. But one of the main things is 100% of the time, they should be asking, do you have a mortgage? What is the balance? What is your interest rate? What is your payment? And most important of all, do you want to have a mortgage going into retirement? Because if you're not asking that question, you're missing out on a third of potentially their overall wealth.
Right.
Because in America, we acquire, wealth in one of two places. a 401k, and in our home. And as you know, being out here on the West Coast, it's even more pronounced. So that's I think that question should be asked 100% of the time, not only by financial planners, but CPAs know, because they're potentially looking at that interest tax deduction, and then of course estate planners, because sometimes there is a substantial amount of wealth that's being transferred down to the heirs, to the estate, or in some cases it goes to a nonprofit. But the fact of the matter is, home equity is a huge pillar of one's own retirement plan.
No, I could see that. And again, thank you for walking us through that very thoughtfully, because it makes a lot more sense. And I think it'll give people a lot of options. So let's talk about the state of the economy today. I know, you mentioned inflation. It's at its highest in 40 years. Interest rates are going up and they continue to go up. The Fed is going to raise them again, it looks like. So why is now the time? So if we're, in that situation, either a single, retiree or a couple, why is now the time, Mike, for them to think about a reverse mortgage?
Yeah. So, and again, I always feel like, and thank you for that question. And as we're recording this, in October of 2022, people that are aware of inflation, as an example, at the beginning of this year, I have a truck and I was filling my truck up for about, $60 the beginning of the year. Today, to fill my truck up, it's like 140. So that is not only an increase in gas prices, but that's inflation. My dollar isn't going as far as it was in the beginning of the year. A gallon of milk. They say that, with CPI, it's energy and groceries stripped out, right? But those are two huge parts of, somebody's budget, food and gas. So everything has gone up across the board. Everything is more expensive. And so inflation is real. For that example of the $5,000 that somebody needs to retire on, well, heck, they may need $6,000 now to retire on. Where is that going to come from? So in my way of thinking, if your home is paid off free and clear, number one, you're sitting on, trapped equity. It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. And by the way, and I don't cross swords with people on this, but I always ask them, what is the rate of return on the equity in your home? Then I'm silent, and it's kind of a trick question. I'm not trying to make anybody feel ignorant, but if I was to say, what's the rate of return on the equity in your home, Roger?
Yeah.
It's
pretty self-explanatory.
It's a goose egg, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just sitting there. And if your home goes down in value, you lost the equity. If it goes up in value, you get the equity. So why not take some of the unknown out of the whole, retirement plan, specifically in regards to, inflation. And if you need that $5,000 a month and you keep taking $5,000 a month, you're going to deplete the golden egg, which is producing the interest that you're living on. So the whole idea would be, in an analogy, is when's the best time to check the engines on an airplane? When it's on the ground. Right? So when is the best time to put something in place that you can perhaps use later that's going to literally save your financial life? So that's why, right now, and even towards the end of the year, everybody's saying it's going to be a cold winter because of interest rates increasing, and, there's kind of three things happening right now. I can touch on this for just a moment if you like me to, as far as economics. So earlier in the year, the Feds told us that they weren't going to buy, they were going to cease from buying the lion's share of the mortgage-backed securities or treasuries, right? So what that means is that when you don't have a buyer, like a sure buyer for something, it causes instability in the market. Okay, so they told us that at the beginning of the year. We knew we would see some, reaction of that with regards to interest rates. And a lot of people think that the federal government controls interest rates. They don't. They don't. They control the overnight lending rate to banks. Okay. Mortgage rates are tied to another instrument. But why is inflation happening and why is interest rates have gone up? Mortgage interest rates have gone up. Well, mortgage interest rates are directly tied to inflation, right? So if you lent, $10,000 and you had inflation, when that money was going to be paid back, the $10,000 maybe with some interest, that $10,000 isn't worth $10,000 anymore.
Yeah.
So you were counting on that interest to make a profit or a arbitrage, if you will. Well, if you don't make the lending price, the lending rate high enough, you're going to end up losing money, right? Because you're not accounting for inflation. So what's happening right now is the federal government is trying to reduce spending, making interest rates go up, the borrowing rate go up. So you have an issue there. So what's that going to do? Some people aren't going to qualify to buy that home they were going to buy at the beginning of the year. So that's going to slow things down. And then you have folks, they're maybe thinking about financing the car purchase. The interest rate is so high, they might think twice about that and continue to drive the car they had.
Yeah.
And, one other factor there is with regards to the, interest rate increasing. Well, technically, inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Okay. So too many dollars chasing too few goods, right? Supply chain issues, right? For a while there, you go into a store or a market and there wouldn't be a lot of things on the shelves.
Right.
If you go into a Ross or a TJ Maxx, large sections of the stores, there was enough on there. But now that the supply chain, these container ships that are coming with all the goods, have landed and they're being trucked all over the country, via semis. So now all of a sudden, there's a lot of supply. And so now you have all this supply, but it's more expensive to buy that. So what do you have? You start having manufacturing slowdowns because no longer do we need to pump all these goods into the stores because nobody's buying them because everything's more expensive. And obviously it's affect their budget. So that's kind of in a macro, what's happening right now with inflation. And that's, as we go into November of this year into December, they've already said, yeah, we're going to continue hiking until we get a control on inflation. So a lot of people think that, man, that's way overkill. You're going to kill the economy. It's going to be a very cold winter. But like everything else, when you manufacture a recession, you have to, bring out a recession. Everything is cyclical. So when inflation starts to go down, so will interest rates. So we probably won't be in this environment forever, but definitely through the end of the year, which a lot of people are saying, and some people are saying through first quarter, maybe second quarter of next year. So that's kind of my take on that. So why should somebody do a reverse mortgage now? Well, the silver lining is home values continue to remain okay. We're not having, at the beginning of the year, when you put a home on the market, you might have a dozen offers cash for 100,000 over.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's not really happening anymore. One of it's because the interest rates have gone up, and it's disqualified some people, but nobody wants to buy at the top of the market.
Right.
So what you have is not a decrease really in home values per se, but you have a leveling off. So the silver lining for folks that own homes is that, hey, interest rates are up, but the equity also
there.
Yeah, the money's there to borrow again. So I think it's a good thing overall. And do you want me to touch on I know this is kind of getting in the weeds on the overall interest rate, housing market, supply chain, inflation, but I can share with you that a lot of people are concerned. They're comparing what's happening now to 2007, 2008, when there was this national housing crisis and homes were way undervalued. We know that that's probably not going to be the case this time around, just because of the pent up demand for homes. There's not enough homes built.
Right.
There's not enough real estate available. So what determines the value of a home? It will never change. It's always jobs, and there's plenty of jobs out there,
Yep.
and supply and demand. And in my neck of the woods, they're not making any more land. And so the homes tend to hold their value or continue to increase, even if it's at a moderate pace. I know it's not that way all over the country, but you can see in the hot housing markets, yeah, there has been a settling and people aren't coming in with cash and, 100,000 over asking, but the home values are, tend to be steady. And look at inventory levels.
Yeah.
Inventory levels are still way off, even going into the winter months, when people tend to say, hey, I'm not going to put my home on the market going into the winter months. I'm going to wait for the spring selling season and do it then. So, but specifically with regards to reverse, and how we can help people, I think it's a great time to at least begin to get educated about how a reverse mortgage can help their parents, help themselves, and really solve some problems that are very real out there, especially now with inflation.
Mike, this was so informative. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this. I definitely learned a ton today. I know our listeners will as well. So thank you for that. I did want to shift gears just a little bit because you and I had a chance to chat briefly before the call, and you were telling me about the conference that you attended this week, the Peter Vargas 10X Stages event. And I'd love for you to just touch on that and tell us about your experience there, why you feel it's important, and maybe we could enlighten some people today about the opportunity that is there.
Yeah, I really feel like your audience, Roger, is one of your audience is folks that are writers, and I believe once they've published a book, there has to be a way to get the message out. In addition to it sitting, on the bookshelves at Barnes and Noble, which the bookstore is almost kind of a vanishing breed. But what Pete Vargas does is Pete Vargas and his business partner, Pat Quinn, is they prepare people with a signature talk. So when they have the opportunity to go on stage, whether it be a digital stage or a physical stage, to really have their message ready, their signature talk ready. And really a signature talk is just a story. And I can share my story with you if there's time, or we can,
absolutely
look at it some other time. But yeah, no, I'd be happy to. And so what it really does is it takes folks who feel like they, there's a message burning inside their chest, and they really feel like, look, my book can change a lot of lives. Every generation, there's the saying is there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
But your story, Roger, and other people's stories, and my story for that matter, because it comes from my heart and my experience, it doesn't matter if it's been, written about or talked about through the years. It's your story and it's my story. Therefore, it's going to resonate with my generation, with the people that I'm able to attract with my message. So the stages is designed to really prepare you for when you go on your own stage or really other people's stages. And that's where the power is. If you're a guest on a podcast, successful podcasters like yourself, really, I mean, true or false, you always like to have fresh content. You're always wanting to
absolutely
discover the story, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of what we do, is to add value to people. We want them to be able to share their story. So whether you're going on a stage at, GrowthCon, which is, attended by, thousands of people, or whether you're on a digital stage, on a podcast that has, 500,000 listeners, you've got to have a story. You may know all day long about your life and the things that have happened, but unless you can distill it and be able to present it in a way that a hearer, would want to listen and it have an impact on them, and that impact would subsequently want them to pick up your book or to learn more about you. But I had a few years ago, there was a lady named Bonnie that was referred to me, and Bonnie was referred to me by a realtor partner. And I called her, we met together in her home, and she says, Mike, I've heard a lot of bad things about reverse mortgages. I'm a little scared. And instead of telling her, the myths about reverse mortgages, I said, Bonnie, what would be your goal? Why am I even here? Why are we talking about this? Tell me what you see, how your life would be different if you were able to get some of the equity out of your home and into your bank account and for you to use on an ongoing basis. And she goes, Mike, my husband died rather suddenly. He was sick, but when he went really quick. And so 2/3 of my income went away. And really after he passed, I've had to, relook at the budget, cut some things out of my budget. And then I realized, hey, I'm going to have to get a part-time job. I'm 75 years old. There's not a lot for me to do. I didn't want to stand on my feet all day in front of a Walmart greeting people. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that just wasn't me. So she told me, she says, I got a newspaper route. And before I tell you how she kind of was making it with that part-time job, let me tell you a couple of the other things that she shared with me that she wanted to do. She said, Mike, there's a few things with the house. While he was sick, things didn't get done. There's a little bit of deferred maintenance on the home that needs to be taken care of. I need about $10,000 for that. And then the other thing was, I love to knit. I love to knit. I love to share my knitting with my community. And she had this ginormous, I don't know what it's called, but it filled up her whole living room. And it was basically a commercial thing that she could literally make carpets with, or, large blankets. And so that's what she was doing. It was her hobby. And here's the number one thing that she told me. And I knew this was important to her because she started to tear up. She says, Mike, I really want to spend time with my grandkids. And one of my sons is in the military. He's got 3 grandkids. They're all the way across the country. It costs a lot of money for he and his wife to put the kids on an airplane to come out here to see grandma. And I really want to see them. So to kind of, I'll kind of not give you every detail. But I will tell you one thing about the job that she had, throwing newspapers. She would go at like 5 in the morning, I think 4:30 in the morning, to where the newspapers were manufactured. She would take the stacks of bundled raw newspapers back to her home, and in her garage, she would cut the strap, she would fold them, put them in the plastic, and then put them in a gigantic hefty bag, and then drive her van around and throw newspapers. Well, this particular newspaper company said, look, you can't use, excuse me, let me back up. She actually had a room where the newspapers were made, the printing press for the newspaper company. They actually gave her a heated room in the wintertime to fold the newspapers, right? So she could do that all right there. She could, fold them, put them in the plastic, and then put them in a big bag, put them in her van, and then drive her route. Well, okay. They told her, we don't have this room for you to use anymore. And so she would, in the wintertime, she would have had to take that home, and in the garage, because that's really the only place there would be to fold them. It was cold, and she, she's, not used to, bundling up in her garage. Not that we have extreme weather shifts up here, but, it gets in the 30s, so, and nobody wants to be out there at, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, folding a newspaper without a heated environment. She said it was killing her. She said She hated it. So the first thing she was going to do, as soon as she got rid of her existing mortgage payment with a reverse mortgage, is she's going to quit her job, and she was going to get the house fixed up, and then she was going to go see her kids and grandkids. So we got that done. And everything was fine. She, we hugged, and she thanked me so much for literally changing her life and allow her to do some of the things that she wanted to do. Well, here's kind of the bummer part. She took like 3 weeks to go visit her son and her grandkids. She went and saw her daughter, and did all that. Was taking pictures, was sending me photos on her iPhone. And I was so happy, that we were able to help her do this. And about 6 months later, I got a call from her daughter. And her daughter said, there was that, the call you, not necessarily that you don't want to get, but, when your day's going and then somebody gives you a message that just makes your heart sink. Well, she said, hey, my mom just passed away. And I want to know what to do with the reverse mortgage. And I was just, dumbfounded. First of all, I was so sad for myself,
Right.
because I really care for this person. I go, what? Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. What happened? She goes, well, she went on that trip. I go, yeah, I know she went on that trip. And then when she got back, she had like a cough, and she went to the doctor, and they say, there's a mass on your lungs. It's inoperable. You've got about 3 weeks to live.
Wow.
And I said, oh my goodness, that's, what a bummer. I didn't say what a bummer, but it's like, wow. But the lady told me, and the daughter told me, and what I really embraced later was that, Mike, she was so happy that she was able to take the last literally days of her life and spend it with her, creating those memories with her kids and her grandkids.
Right.
Plus, she got to take a house that she was able to button up and really prepare for whatever the kids wanted to do with it. So that was the power, of a reverse mortgage and how it affected her life. And that plays out, across the nation on a pretty regular basis, where we're really impacting lives by giving them permission to harvest the equity in their home to really do what they want to do. She didn't know that she was going to be gone in less than a year from the time that we began to talk.
Right. Right.
But
Wow.
she was able to do that.
Oh, amazing story. Amazing story. So great, Mike. This has been tremendous. Again, thank you for educating us today. Before I let you go, I do have one last question that I'd like to ask every guest, and I think it's really relevant for you. You're helping hundreds of families, as we talked about in the beginning. But at the end of the day, you still have a lot of life to live. What do you want your legacy to be? What kind of mark do you want to leave on this earth?
I really appreciate you asking me that, and it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a great interviewer. I feel with my values that the family is the building block of any modern society. And I know that the number one reason that people end up calling it quits in a marriage is because of money. It's around money. So if I can affect that area of people's lives, especially during the last maybe few chapters of their life in retirement, that is legacy material for me. The other thing is, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the number one reason that people take their life, suicide, is they have no hope around money. So that's another area. I believe that if somebody can get through their time where they don't feel like their life is worth anything, they're not impacting anybody, nobody cares about them. If we can get them through that, on the other side of that, they have a chance of really becoming what God put them on this planet to become and do. So money is a big deal. Money is the number one reason people decide to take their lives. No hope around money. So if I can affect family and legacy and generational wealth, and if I can just touch somebody and help them figure out the money thing, that for me is a huge impact. If I do nothing else but those two things, with my occupation, I think that's a win, and I would definitely consider that success.
That's wonderful, Mike. Mike, welcome to the American Real family. Thank you so much. For people that want to reach you, what is the best way? I know we have your website here, but what's the best way for them to reach you? And I know you also have that free calculator on your website.
Yeah, go ahead and go to norcalreverse.com, norcalreverse.com, or you can simply type in my name, www.michaelbrouse.com. It'll take you to the same place, or give me a call or give me a text, 707-888-8230. A lot of people say, Mike, you shouldn't give your personal cell phone away. Hey, I want to help people. If I can help you, if I can help somebody, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, 888-8230.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks again. And I cannot wait to air this episode.
Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate the time, and I really appreciate what you're doing with the message that you're getting out there through your platform.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into American Real. Be sure to visit our website, americanreal.tv, or search for us on iTunes or YouTube for past episodes. While you're there, please rate us or leave us a review, as that helps others find our show. I am truly grateful and appreciate all of your support. If you'd like to be part of our inner circle or want one-on-one coaching, check out the American Real Learning Academy, where we have self-help groups and courses so you can build the best you. We also have a new Facebook group where you can connect with high achievers from around the world. If you want to go even further, maybe you're determined to write your own book or launch your own podcast, contact me today to see if we could help. You can reach me through Instagram or Facebook, or email me directly at roger@americanreal.tv. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you